Hi, this is my review featuring the Wicked Ones role-playing game. In this role-playing game, the player characters play as a group of monsters, kobolds, zombies, skeletons, orcs, gnolls, anything that you want to play. If you want to play as a spectre, a morgue, all the rules are contained here to create any sort of monster, slimes, quaggots, gibbering mouthers. It's all here. So this group of monsters have their own dungeon, their own treasure hoard, and they have to protect their dungeon from the would-be heroes who suddenly decide to go on a dungeon crawl expedition. They will also be taking over the surrounding lands. And being monsters, of course, it is possible that they will get killed by the heroes, but you would only need to create a new monster or promote one of the existing monsters that are inhabiting the dungeon. But this is just a very small summary of what this game is capable of. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. Well, first of all, this is truly a deluxe version. You have many additional files, you have character sheets, you have a rules reference document, because there are some complexities and some depth to different subsystems within the game. You also have maps, a total of 4 sandbox maps or campaign maps of excellent definition. You have a 150 dpi and 300 dpi version for each of the different maps. You also have many virtual tabletop assets that you can use. You have adventurers, that is figures and tokens. There are also chapter icons. You also have clocks. We will talk about those in future parts of this review. You also have dice faces. You also have dungeon tokens to map and mark the different layouts of the dungeon. You also have faction banners, you also have god images and symbols, you also have imps, magic effects and focuses, and of course you also have figures for monsters and tokens, and you have page decorations. So overall, truly a deluxe document with many tools to help you in your tabletop role-playing experience. Now when it comes to the core rulebook, it is excellent. I only managed to spot a couple of typos, but the document is truly excellent. You even have an errata already integrated into the document. You also have the separate errata file, so you can see the changes that occurred between the initial version and the corrected version. The illustrations look awesome. They are in a sort of dark comedy style. They have different shadows and contrasts and a skillful use of shaded colors and a few bright colors to represent the darkness of the world, that you are the villains but at the same time you are the protagonists of the story. Everything is well written and explained. The graphic design looks great. You have bookmarks, you have an index. The graphic design and layout looks great. The document looks like some sort of ancient book or scroll, but you also have these dungeon motifs on the side, on the edge of the pages, so it looks amazing. The document is fully bookmarked and you have an index, so overall the quality is superb. Now let's talk about the contents. The book starts with an introduction to what this role-playing game is all about. The player characters are a group of evil monsters. They are building a dungeon, filling it with traps and other defenses to keep their hoard safe. And of course, because you are fantasy monsters, you are going to be pillaging and killing and destroying, and as a result of that, fantasy heroes are going to go after you. So you need to see how much you are going to survive. Maybe your dungeon will become unstoppable and you will take over the surrounding lands. And as a monster, you are flawed, you are driven by your own base desires. So this game is also about keeping your base impulses in check as you rally others to your cause and focus on a grander scheme. The dungeon itself is a very important presence within the story that you're going to be telling through this game. The dungeon could very well be the main character of the story, and the rest of the monsters are there to support the dungeon. So this is about monsters banding together and building a legacy of evil. This role-playing game is in the sandbox style of play. It is assumed that the story is going to focus on the dungeon, expanding on players working together, crafting this sandbox, drawing a map full of factions and points of interest for your dungeon to get involved with. The maps included with this core rulebook will help you build many different campaigns, but eventually you will probably want to come up with your own original maps. This role-playing game is based on the Blades in the Dark system, adapted to these monsters living in a dungeon theme. It has a flexible resolution system that lets you get creative with character actions. It's all about cutting to the action and getting to the good parts. It makes for entertaining, chaotic stories, where no matter what you do, things are bound to go wrong. In this introduction, they also list the influences and inspiration for this role-playing game, such as Dungeon Keeper, War for the Overworld, Wicked Ones, Overlord, Rimworld. You also have Saga of the Goblin Horde, No Country for Old Kobolds, and although it is not listed as such, this game also reminds me of the Dungeon Lords board game. Now, when it comes to role-playing as these monsters, there is a certain degree of evil. You are villains in the story, but you also have your own objectives, your stories, your desires, and you act a bit like a B-movie villain. They are fundamentally evil by their very nature, but you could have some comedic moments as well. Now, to play this game, you need this book, of course, and a basic understanding of how role-playing games work. That is, this game is not going to teach you everything about role-playing games. It does cover the basics, but it's better if you look into things a bit further. You're also going to need a bunch of 6-sided dice, ideally 4 or more per player, and just like many other role-playing games, this game requires a game master and between 2 to 4 players. However, there is a solo supplement that I have seen released recently. I haven't used that one yet. I'm going to put the link in the description below. And you also need paper and pencils, of course. So in Wicked Ones, you're going to be playing these monsters with different callings. Callings could be considered like character classes or archetypes. This is a game driven by character action. The game master doesn't usually roll for non-player character actions. The players do almost all of the rolling by declaring what their characters do. And so the world and the non-player characters then act based on the roll results of the player characters. You start the game by choosing a dungeon theme, which helps the players make characters that have a similar ambition, and this also determines the sort of rooms that you can build within your dungeon. We will get deeper into the different details of the rules in future parts of this review. You draw out your dungeon in detail on the dungeon sheet, including rooms, traps, locks, and the creatures that inhabit it. You gather a horde and protect it from adventurers. When the adventurers enter your dungeon, your minions confront them on the first level, while the player characters wait in the sanctum for a titanic final confrontation. Each character has a set of 9 actions rated from 0 to 3 dots, which are used when you want your character to do something. Before you make a roll, the game master determines the position and effect of the roll. Position is a measure of how bad the consequences will be if you fail, while effect is a measure of how large of an impact you will have if you succeed. When you want to do something, you declare your intent and what action you'd like to use. The game master gives you the position and effect, and you then decide whether to roll or not. You roll a number of 6-sided dice equal to the action rating you chose. Then you take the highest result from the roll. If it's a 1, 2, or 3, it's a failure, and you suffer a consequence determined by how bad your position was. A 4 or 5 is a mixed result, meaning you managed to accomplish your goal, but suffer a consequence as well. If you roll a 6, it's a success, and you accomplish it without any consequences. 2 6s is a critical, and you get an awesome extra benefit along with your success. Consequences may come in many forms, such as taking shock, becoming bloodied, many different conditions that will affect your character negatively and of course your actions. When you suffer a consequence, you can roll an action to resist it, reducing the impact of the consequence or maybe even negating it entirely. When you resist, you take an amount of stress depending on the roll. Stress is a resource every character has that allows them to keep their dark impulse in check. Characters can also spend stress to empower abilities they have, like casting powerful spells or using monstrous strength. Your dark impulse rests within your monstrous heart, constantly trying to pull you away from the tasks at hand. You can be compelled to follow through on a dark impulse, taking an action that plays towards it. Doing so will reward you with Dark Heart, a bankable die that you can add to a later roll. You can also spend stress to suppress the compel. However, when you take too much stress, you snap and go feral, giving in to your dark impulse completely, having to immediately take an action that directly plays into it. The game progresses through 4 phases: Lurking, Calamity, Raiding, and Blowback. You begin the Lurking phase with Recovery. clearing all of your stress and healing all of your wounds. You then pile your loot from the previous raid onto your horde and partake in revelry, earning gold, dark hearts, and items. You can then take a downtime action that you can use to build your dungeon, craft inventions and potions, recruit minions, and so on. The minions you control can also be paid to perform downtime actions. When the lurking phase ends, you go through the calamity phase, where the game master rolls to see if any calamity happened within your dungeon, such as minions revolting or tunnels collapsing perhaps. During the raiding phase, you get ready to head out of your dungeon. You select a target, you choose a plan, and you provide a few details. The game master then rolls engagement, and you skip directly to the first steps of the raid plan unfolding. Raids are where the bulk of the action in the game happens, as you hit targets for the gold and materials your dungeon needs. After the raid winds down, you go through the blowback phase, where the game master rolls to see if your actions caused any blowback, such as an ambush waiting for you or targets along a prosperous trade route drying up. Calamity and blowback sometimes result in dungeon invasions as a group of powerful adventurers show up at your dungeon, though adventurers might also show up as a result of events within the story. The player characters, like any evil dungeon boss, await them in their sanctum and make their minions, creatures, locks, traps, tricks, etc. attempt to fend them off. If the adventurers manage to make their way into the sanctum, the player characters face off against them in a final battle. After looting the bodies and enjoying some post-defense revelry, you jump right back into the phase cycle and continue raiding and pillaging the overworld. Now this is just a small glimpse into the flow of the game. We will go further into details and deeper into specifics in other parts of this review. Following that, you have a couple of lists detailing technical advice on how to run a proper game of Wicked Ones. For example, you have player best practices. You're a monster, so act like one. You need to act like a villain. You need to think about what motivates your monster. You also describe what is going on in every scene or encounter. You should also play following the spirit of the game, not abusing the rules, but rather thinking of creating a character that you want to play as and acting as that character, accomplishing your goals and objectives. You should also embrace the risks, the danger. You should listen to your dark impulse if you are not sure what your monster would do in a particular situation. When it comes to the list detailing the best practices a game master should follow, you have things such as be the player character's worst enemy but also their biggest fan, providing challenges but also cheering their success and providing help in the form of non-player characters, explaining the rules and such. You should also try to bring the world to life. Be the dark desires lurking in the hearts of the player characters. Get them into interesting situations based on their monstrous nature. It's also important to let the players drive their story with their own actions and to keep the game moving. You also have advice on how to make the game as civil as the group wants it. As expected, the players are going to be participating as villains, as monsters, but that doesn't mean there won't be any comical elements to the entire experience. So you should handle things in a sort of dark comedy style if you wanted to. You can also turn things up or down concerning how evil the game is or how comical, but it's all up to you and your group. That's why they recommend using the tools known as lines and veils and the X card. Many of you know about these tools. It's basically a way to tone down the game when some situations turn uncomfortable. Although I've never used these tools because, well, they seem a bit pointless in my opinion. We are all adults when playing at the table, or at least you should act like a mature player and game master. So if someone feels a bit awkward or uncomfortable during a particular scene, you could say something like, "Could we skip this scene? I'm not very comfortable dealing with it." Or maybe you could say, "Could we tone down this scene a bit?" Or maybe you could ask for the scene to fade to black. So like I said, well, here you have the information on how to use the lines and veils and the X card, but you could also just talk it over, just say that you want to skip a scene or tone down a scene, etc. That's why Session 0 is important. That way you can set the sort of evil that you want to play in this game of Wicked Ones. Now we have an example of how a session in Wicked Ones could proceed. I am going to show you the entire example so that you get a better grasp of the game mechanics and the theme. This example is called A Place to Call Home. During the first session, The player character's main task is finding a place to set up their dungeon. As this needs to be a prime location, it's likely to have somebody already there. Here we see our player characters about to launch a raid on a cave some merchants are camping in. The player characters are Ulrot, an orc brute, Crag, a kobold shaman, and Slem, a Slisik shadow. These Slisik are basically snake people, the game master says. The wind picks up, dousing your campfire in rain. It goes dark, and you sit there shivering in the cold. Then suddenly, you hear something off in the distance, the sound of laughter. Then a voice, a human voice. They sound happy, like they're joking with a friend. Ulrot speaks.
You guys hear that? Sounds like someone's out of the rain. Ain't gonna be laughing like that if you're out here shivering your ass off.
Then Crag speaks.
Yeah, screw this. Let's chop them up. Maybe they have food.
Then Slime replies.
We don't even know how many are over there. Let's hold off until they go to sleep. Then we can sneak in and slit their throats.
Ulrot speaks.
No time for that. I grab my axe and point off towards the voices. Food, no rain, human blood, why wait?
Crag replies.
I think I'm with Slem on this one. We have good cover and no idea what we're facing in there. Better to be sneaky.
The game master replies. Sounds like a stealth raid to me. You guys are gonna figure out pretty quickly that this is a small merchant caravan holed up in a cave up ahead, waiting out the storm. What's your point of entry here? Slem speaks.
Keep it simple and go through the front. They might have a guard, so that'll be the first step. We'll wait until it's good and quiet, and hopefully the rain can cover us.
The game master replies. You sticking together or splitting up? Ulrot speaks.
Splitting up. I can't skulk at all, so I'm just gonna hang back and come charging in as soon as I hear a human voice. I'm the plan B.
The game master replies. Great. Let's roll engagement and jump into the action. The rain gives you all cover, and these guys are a bit drunk, so let's up it to 3D. The game master rolls engagement and gets a failure. The game master speaks. You're going to start in a tight spot. Slem, you and Crag are moving through the forest, rain just pouring down. It's quiet as you approach the cave entrance, though you do catch the light glow of a dying fire. You don't see anyone on watch, but just as you get ready to head inside, you hear someone stumbling through the forest. Turning, you see a wide-eyed drunk mercenary coming back to his post after relieving himself. Crag speaks.
So I'm the closest to him since he came up behind us. I jump straight at him and try to smash my hands over his mouth so he can't yell.
Sounds good, replies the game master. Let's see that roll. Crag rolls 1D of smash and gets a mixed result. The game master speaks. A mixed, okay, you do it, but he pulls a dagger and slashes your arm, giving you muscles shock. Tell us what that looks like. Crag speaks.
He's a bit taller than me, so I grab the front of his shirt and sling myself up onto his back and just clamp my other hand over his mouth hard. Unfortunately, he was more keen to get that dagger out than yell.
Slem speaks.
Looks like I'm up. I see him waving that dagger around wildly with the kobold on his back. I'm just going to step up and slit his throat. It's just a quick slash, so I'm rolling finesse.
Crag speaks.
I'll assist for sure. I pull back on his face, exposing his throat.
The game master speaks. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You have strong effect. Slem rolls 2D on finesse and gets a mixed result. The game master speaks. So I think with the strong effect, this guy is definitely dead. He was their toughest guy as well, but it's gonna make some noise. Slem speaks.
The knife cuts a perfect line across his throat, and his eyes go wide. I grin wickedly, then blood comes gushing out. But what was the noise?
Crag speaks.
I got it! Right before you slit his throat, he bites real deep into my hand, and I yelp. But I think I'm going to resist that and try to hold it in.
Ulrot speaks.
Ha, don't bother. So my dark impulse is reckless, right? Yeah, I think I'm getting impatient out here waiting and want a dark heart. Crack's yelp is drowned out by me charging past, yelling, "Let's do this!"
And that concludes part 1 of this review. We will take a closer look at many of the different aspects of the Wicked Ones role-playing game in the future parts, so please stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching this review, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending Drive-Thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and see you later.